The dining facility at Forward Operating Base Archer buzzed with the low, familiar hum of generators and tired conversation. It was a soundscape of clattering metal trays, the scrape of boots on concrete, and the murmurs of soldiers trading stories from the wire. Staff Sergeant Eva Rostova moved through the line with an economy of motion that was nearly invisible. She took a portion of rice, grilled chicken, and a bottle of water. Nothing more. She found an empty table in the corner, away from the boisterous groups of infantrymen and the self-important clusters of staff officers, and sat with her back to the wall. It was a habit born of profession, not paranoia. She was halfway through her meal when a shadow fell over her table. A large, imposing shadow that smelled of expensive cologne and authority. Brigadier General Marcus Thorne, commander of the sector, stood over her, flanked by his aide and a stern-faced Colonel Davies. The general's chest was a billboard of ribbons and badges, a testament to a long career spent climbing ladders. His eyes, however, were fixed on the single, subdued emblem on Rostova's right sleeve. It was a dark, circular patch showing a stylized phoenix rising from what looked like static or flames, embroidered with the Latin words Fides in Tenebris, faith in darkness. The low hum of the dining facility faltered as heads began to turn. General Thorne's voice, accustomed to filling cavernous briefing rooms, sliced through the air. Staff Sergeant, I don't recognize that piece of flair you're wearing. Rostova finished chewing a piece of chicken, swallowed, and placed her fork down neatly beside her plate. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. It is a unit insignia, General. A unit insignia, Thorne repeated, a smirk playing on his lips. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on her small table, making it wobble. I'm familiar with every authorized unit patch in this theater of operations. Every single one. That little bird of yours is not on the list. It looks like something you bought on the internet.
Colonel Davis chuckled dutifully.
Probably from one of those tactical lifestyle brands, sir. Rostova's gaze remained steady. It was issued, sir. Thorne's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. He saw a small, quiet woman, barely 5.5 feet tall, whose uniform seemed a size too big. He saw silence and assumed timidity. He saw a female face in a sniper-qualified role and assumed a quota had been met. He saw weakness where there was only profound stillness. Issued by who? Captain Crunch? You think you can walk around my forward operating base wearing unauthorized decorations? You think the rules don't apply to you? His voice rose with each question, drawing every eye in the room. The clatter of cutlery had ceased entirely. There was only the sound of the general's indignation and the distant drone of a surveillance aircraft. The insignia is authorized for my parent unit, General, Rostova said, her tone as flat and even as a firing range on a calm day. And what unit is that? Thorne demanded, straightening up and crossing his arms. Let me guess. The 1st Fictional Battalion? The Secret Squirrels? Take it off. Now he pointed a thick finger at her sleeve. Rostova did not move. Her hands remained resting on the table, one on each side of her tray. She did not blink. I am not authorized to remove it, sir. The general's face flushed a deep, mottled red. It was a public challenge, an act of insubordination in front of half the base. You are not authorized? Staff Sergeant, you are a guest here. Your team is attached to my command, which means you fall under my authority. I am giving you a direct order. Remove that ridiculous patch, or I will have the military police escort you to the stockade for disobeying a lawful order from a general officer. Is that clear? The silence in the room was now absolute, heavy, and suffocating. Every soldier and officer watched, waiting for the inevitable collapse. They saw a lone staff sergeant being crushed by the institutional weight of a one-star general. Rostova slowly picked up her bottle of water. She unscrewed the cap, took a small sip, and screwed it back on with deliberate precision. She looked past the general, her eyes scanning the room for a moment, noting the locations of the security cameras. One was positioned perfectly over the exit, with a clear view of their table. She then met Thorne's furious gaze again. Her voice, when she spoke, was no louder than before, yet it carried across the silent hall. "Understood, sir." She did not reach for her sleeve. Instead, she stood, picked up her tray, and walked to the disposal window. She scraped her plate clean, placed the tray on the rack, and walked out of the dining facility without a backward glance. She left the general standing there, his order hanging unfulfilled in the thick, stunned air. He was left with the choice of escalating further and looking like a bully, or letting it go and looking weak. He chose to fume, turning to Colonel Davies. "Get her service record. I want to know who the hell she thinks she is." Rostova walked back to the small, windowless, sensitive, compartmented information facility that served as her team's workspace. The air inside was cool and smelled of ozone from the servers. Her partner, Sergeant First Class Ben Carter, a seasoned spotter with a face like a roadmap, looked up from his terminal. He had heard the story already. Bad news traveled at the speed of light on a forward operating base. "Heard you met the landlord," Carter said, his voice low. Rostova said nothing. She sat down at her own station, powered on the monitor, and opened a new encrypted file. It was a standard incident report form. She began to type, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Date: October 23rd. Time: 1837 Zulu. Location: dining facility, forward operating base Archer. Subject: interaction with Brigadier General Marcus Thorne. She detailed the conversation verbatim, a feat of memory that would have astonished anyone who did not know her. She listed General Thorne, Colonel Davies, and herself as personnel involved. She noted the presence of approximately 150 witnesses and the location of Camera 7, which had a direct line of sight. She described the order given and her response. She did not characterize the general's tone or intent. She did not mention her own feelings, because there were none to mention. There was only data. The interaction was a data point. The general's emotional response was a variable. Her own calm was a control. She finished the report, encrypted it, and saved it to a secure server accessible only by her unit's operational command, thousands of miles away. She did not send it. She simply filed it. A piece of documented proof waiting. Chain of custody mattered. With the report filed, she turned to another screen. This one displayed a complex waterfall of radio frequency signals, a chaotic spectrum of noise harvested from the valley below. She put on a pair of high-fidelity headphones and closed her eyes, letting the patterns flow over her. She was not just looking at the data. She was listening to it. To everyone else, it was static. To her, it was a language. She could discern the unique digital fingerprints of different enemy radio models, the subtle frequency hopping algorithms they used, the latency in their network that betrayed the location of their command nodes. This was her true domain, the world of signals and whispers of ghosts in the machine. The incident in the dining facility was already a distant echo, a brief, irrelevant spike in a sea of otherwise meaningful noise. She spent the next 3 hours in that chair, motionless except for the occasional minute adjustment of a filter on her terminal. She was mapping the enemy's communications network not by its content, but by its behavior. She was tracing the digital shadows, building a picture of their command structure one packet at a time. It was meticulous, painstaking work that required a level of patience bordering on the inhuman. By the time she was done, she had isolated a polymorphic signal that was trying very hard to hide. It was a command channel, she was sure of it, belonging to a high-value individual the sector had been hunting for months. A bomb maker and insurgent leader known only as the Engineer. The signal was heavily encrypted and bounced through a series of decoys, but it had a flaw. A tiny, repeating artifact in its frequency-hopping signature, a digital stutter so faint it was practically non-existent. To Rostova, it was a beacon. The next morning, Colonel Davies appeared at her workspace. He carried a tablet and an air of smug satisfaction. "Staff Sergeant Rostova, General Thorne has reviewed your deployment orders. He finds your team's current tasking, passive signals intelligence overwatch, to be an inefficient use of resources." Rostova looked up from her screen, her face impassive. Carter tensed beside her. "You're being reassigned," Davies continued, clearly enjoying himself. We have a backlog of raw signals data from Sector Gamma. 3 months of it. Terabytes. It's been flagged as low priority, mostly atmospheric noise and commercial spillover. Your new assignment is to manually review all of it. Tag any anomalies. A full report is due in 72 hours. It was a punishment and a cruel one. It was the digital equivalent of being ordered to count every grain of sand on a beach. It was a fool's errand designed to bury her in meaningless work, to break her with sheer, soul-crushing boredom. It was also an attempt to sideline her, to remove her from any meaningful operational role where she might distinguish herself. Understood, Colonel, Rostova said, her voice betraying no emotion. Davies smirked. See that you do, he turned and left. Carter let out a long breath. 72 hours? It would take a team of 10 a month to sift through that garbage. He's setting you up to fail. It is a task, Rostova replied, already pulling the first data block from the server. The task will be completed. For the next 2 days she worked. She did not sleep. Carter brought her food, which she ate at her station. He tried to help, but the sheer volume was overwhelming, and he lacked her unique talent for seeing patterns in the chaos. She worked through the data methodically, her eyes scanning endless lines of code and signal plots. Most of it was exactly what Davies had said, junk. But Rostova did not see junk. She saw a landscape, and every landscape has features. On the second day, deep inside a block of corrupted data from a drone flight 2 months prior, she found it. It was a ghost, a signal fragment that lasted less than 1/10 of a second, an encrypted burst that had been dismissed as a sensor glitch. But it had the same signature, the same infinitesimal stutter, as the command channel she had isolated from the engineer's network. It was a breadcrumb. Using the timestamp and the drone's coordinates, she cross-referenced the fragment with satellite imagery from that day. There was nothing there, just an empty stretch of high desert. But her work wasn't just about the visible spectrum. She pulled up thermal imaging overlays. Still nothing. Then she accessed the ground-penetrating radar logs from a different surveillance pass. And there it was. Faint anomaly. A void beneath the sand, approximately 12 feet down. An entrance to a bunker, perfectly concealed. The signal fragment was a transmission sent as someone entered or exited. The engineer's hideout. He had been right under their noses for months. She compiled her findings into a compact, 3-page report. It included the signal analysis, the geolocation data, the radar logs, and a proposed course of action. She did not mention her reassignment or the terabytes of junk data. She presented only the solution. She handed it to Carter. Give this to Captain Miller. No one else. Captain Miller was their team's actual commanding officer. A pragmatic officer who had served with Rostova on 2 previous deployments. He was outranked and outmaneuvered by Thorne's staff, but he knew his people. He read the report, his eyes widening. He went straight to the sector's operations center. The atmosphere inside the operations center was tense. An informant had been captured and, under interrogation, had revealed that the engineer was planning a massive attack on the main supply route within the next 24 hours. Panic was setting in. Thorne's command staff were throwing assets at the problem, sending drones to every suspected location, but they were flying blind. The engineer remained a ghost. Captain Miller bypassed Colonel Davies and approached the battle captain. Sir, I have actionable intelligence on the HVT's primary location. Thorne, who was overseeing the chaos, overheard. Actionable intelligence? From who? Your quiet little signals sergeant. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. What did she find in all that noise I gave her? The secret recipe for Coca-Cola? Sir, Miller said, his voice firm. Staff Sergeant Rostova has triangulated the target's command bunker. The data is here. Solid, he held out the tablet. Thorne waved it away dismissively. I don't have time for conspiracy theories from disgruntled staff sergeants. We're chasing real leads here. Just then, a new piece of intelligence came in. A panicked intercept from a low-level enemy operative confirmed the attack was imminent and mentioned the engineer was personally overseeing the final preparations from a command post. The location was not specified, but the operative used a code word for the hideout, the Scorpion's Nest. Rostova, who had followed Miller into the operations center and was standing silently in the back, spoke. Her voice was quiet but cut through the noise. The geological formation above the subterranean void is a scaly rock outcropping that resembles a scorpion's tail. It is a logical source for the code word. All eyes turned to her. Thorne glared. How would you know that? It was in the topographical survey data attached to the drone logs I was assigned to review, sir, she replied. The pieces clicked into place with an audible snap. The room fell silent. Thorne looked at the frantic activity on the main screen, then at the calm, certain woman in the corner, and then at the report in Captain Miller's hand. His arrogance was at war with the dawning, terrifying possibility that she was right and he was about to lose control of his sector. The location is at the extreme edge of our engagement envelope, Colonel Davies said, reading the report over Miller's shoulder. 1,975 meters. It's in a narrow canyon with unpredictable wind shears. Airstrike is too risky. The bunker is deep and we can't guarantee a direct hit without better intelligence. We can't get a ground team there in time. We have sniper teams, Thorne said, grasping at straws. No team on this base is rated for a shot like that, sir, the battle captain countered. Not with these atmospheric conditions. The probability of a first-round hit is less than 5%. A 5% chance was no chance at all. A miss would alert the engineer, and he would vanish again, leaving them to face his attack blind. Rostova spoke again, her voice still a calm, measured instrument. The probability is not 5%. My solution has a 97% probability of a first-round hit on a man-sized target through the designated aperture. A murmur went through the room. 97% at nearly 2 kilometers in a canyon? It was an impossible claim. Aperture? What aperture? Thorne demanded. The ground-penetrating radar shows a ventilation shaft, Rostova explained, pointing to a diagram in her report that was now on the main screen. It is shielded by rock, but the thermal imaging from 0400 hours, when the cool desert air creates maximum temperature differential, shows a faint heat plume. The shaft is 18 inches in diameter. It leads directly to the primary command chamber, 20 feet below. The target will have to pass it to reach the communications console. She had not only found the needle in the haystack, she had calculated the exact dimensions of the eye of the needle. Thorne stared at the screen, then at her. The fury in his eyes was being replaced by something else. A cold, grudging disbelief. He saw the patch on her sleeve. The Phoenix. Fides in Tenebris. How do you propose to make that shot? He asked, his voice strained. And how do you defeat his electronic countermeasures? His network will detect any drone or laser rangefinder we put near him. We will not use a drone or a laser, Rostova said. Sergeant Carter and I will infiltrate to an overwatch position 1,975 meters away. The enemy's countermeasures are designed to detect active emissions. They are not looking for passive analysis. I have mapped their frequency hopping sequence. I can predict its behavior. Just before the shot, I will broadcast a polymorphic signal that mimics their own network's handshake protocol. For 300 milliseconds, their system will register my broadcast as a friendly signal. It will create a window. In that window, the shot will be taken. It was breathtakingly audacious. She was proposing to hack the enemy's network with a single, perfectly timed radio burst from a tactical device, creating a momentary blind spot for her bullet to travel through. And the ballistics? Davies challenged. The wind in that canyon is a nightmare. The wind is not random, Rostova corrected him. It is a system. The canyon's topology creates a cyclical vortex. I have modeled it based on the archived atmospheric data you assigned me. The cycle repeats every 72 seconds. There is a 4-second window at the apex of the cycle where the crosswind velocity drops to near zero. That is the window for the shot. She had turned her punishment into the key to the entire operation. The junk data Thorne and Davies had buried her in was the very source of her solution. She had seen the entire battlefield, from radio waves to wind patterns, and synthesized it all into a single, perfect moment of lethal calculation. General Thorne was silent for a long time. The entire operations center waited. He was trapped. His own methods had failed. The clock was ticking. Before him stood a staff sergeant he had publicly humiliated, offering an impossible solution derived from the very task he had given her as a punishment. To refuse was to admit defeat. To accept was to stake his career on a woman he had dismissed as a decoration-wearing incompetent. Finally, he looked at Captain Miller. Get them whatever they need. His voice was tight with suppressed rage and a dawning, terrible respect. But if they miss, I'll have both your stripes. The sun was a brutal hammer in the sky as Rostova and Carter lay prone on a rocky ledge overlooking the canyon. The heat shimmer rising from the ground distorted the air, making the target area dance and swim in the optics. It had taken them 6 hours to move into position, a slow, painstaking crawl through rock and sand. They were now a part of the landscape, wrapped in camouflage, invisible. Carter lay beside her, his spotting scope trained on the scaly rock formation that hid the engineer's lair. He murmured a constant stream of data into his microphone. Wind is 7 miles per hour, gusting to 10, shifting from 2 o'clock. Mirage is running hard right to left. Temperature is 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure is 29.92 and falling. Rostova lay perfectly still behind her 338 Lapua Magnum rifle. The weapon was an extension of her own body. She was not looking through the main scope. Her eye was pressed to a smaller, secondary optic connected to her terminal, which displayed the atmospheric and signal data she was monitoring. Her left hand rested on a small, custom-built electronic warfare device. She did not speak. She breathed. In for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. Her heart rate was a steady 60 beats per minute. No sign of activity, Carter whispered. He's deep in his hole. He will surface, Rostova said. It was not a guess. It was a statement of fact. Her analysis of his communication patterns indicated he personally checked his long-range antenna array every day before initiating a major operation. That would happen within the next 30 minutes. They waited. The sun crawled across the sky. The heat was relentless. Sweat dripped from Carter's brow, but Rostova remained dry, her body a perfectly regulated machine. 20 minutes passed in silence. I have a signal, Rostova said suddenly. Her voice was unchanged. He's powering up the array. Carter focused his scope. Still nothing. Wait, I have movement. A section of rock is sliding away. It's a camouflage door. A figure emerged from the darkness of the bunker, squinting in the harsh sunlight. He was a tall man with a beard, flanked by 2 armed guards. He walked toward a small satellite dish hidden among the rocks. It was him, the engineer. Target acquired, Carter confirmed. Range is 1974 meters. He's moving. I can't get a stable read. He will stop at the console, Rostova said. She was now looking through her main rifle scope. The world was compressed into a small circle of magnified light. The engineer was a tiny, shimmering figure in the haze. She adjusted the elevation turret on her scope. Click, click, click. 123 clicks up. She adjusted the windage turret. 8 clicks left. Her calculations were already done. The rifle was already doped for the distance, the temperature, the humidity, the barometric pressure, even the Coriolis effect, the slight drift caused by the Earth's rotation. All that remained was the wind. The unpredictable, chaotic wind. Wind is holding at 9 miles per hour, from 230, Carter breathed. The vortex is building. It's going to be a rough ride. Rostova watched the mirage through her scope. It was a river of heat flowing violently across her field of view. To fire now would be to send the bullet on a wild, unpredictable path. She waited. Her finger rested on the trigger. She continued her breathing cycle. Vortex is at peak velocity, Carter said, his voice tight with tension. Any second now. Rostova watched the river of heat. For a moment, it swirled, churned, and then Just as her model predicted, it straightened. The shimmering air became almost placid. The river had stopped flowing. "Window is open," Carter hissed. For seconds. In that instant, a sequence of events unfolded with the precision of a Swiss watch. Rostova's left thumb pressed a button on the electronic warfare device. A 300-millisecond burst of polymorphic code shot across the canyon, striking the engineer's command network. For a fraction of a second, his entire security system saw nothing but a friendly handshake. Simultaneously, Rostova's lungs exhaled half their air. Her world contracted to the reticle, the trigger, and the target. The crosshairs were perfectly steady on the engineer's upper torso. She applied pressure to the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, a controlled, violent push. The sound of the shot was a sharp crack, immediately swallowed by the vast emptiness of the desert. The 250-grain bullet left the muzzle at nearly 3,000 feet per second, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. It was now an autonomous entity, on a 2.5-second journey governed by the unpitying laws of physics. Rostova did not watch its impact. Her job was done. She was already cycling the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, and chambering a new round, her eyes scanning for other threats. It was Carter who watched the bullet's arrival. "Flight time, 2.6 seconds, he murmured, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Impact, impact, target down. He's down." Through his scope, he saw the engineer collapse, a puppet with its strings cut. The two guards stared in confusion, looking for the source of the shot, but there was nothing to see. They were shooting at a ghost. They grabbed their leader's body and scrambled back into the bunker. The camouflage door slid shut. In the operations center, a communications analyst shouted, "Sir, we've lost the engineer's command signal. It just flatlined." The room erupted. Cheers and backslaps echoed off the walls. General Thorne stood frozen, staring at the main screen where a single red icon labeled HVT had just been blinked out of existence. He looked at the data feed from Rostova's rifle scope, which showed the range, the ballistic solution she had dialed in, and the time of the shot. It all matched. It was all real. He had just witnessed a miracle of science and will, an impossible shot made by an impossible soldier. The debriefing was held in a sterile, windowless conference room. General Thorne sat at the head of the table, flanked by Colonel Davies. Captain Miller sat opposite them. Rostova and Carter stood at ease by the door. The mood was somber, formal. Thorne cleared his throat. He looked not at Rostova, but at a point on the wall just above her head. The after-action report confirms a successful neutralization of the high-value target known as the Engineer. The planned attack on the supply route was averted. This was a significant victory for this command. He paused, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The success of the operation was due to the intelligence and precision marksmanship of Staff Sergeant Rostova. It was the closest he could come to an apology. Colonel Davies stared at the table, his face a mask of resentment. Thorne continued, "I have reviewed Staff Sergeant Rostova's service record. It is extensive." He picked up a file. "It seems her parent unit is the 75th Special Projects Group, a Tier 1 asset specializing in long-range interdiction and electronic warfare. Most of this file is redacted, but the commendations are not." He looked down at the page. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and a list of school qualifications longer than my arm. He closed the file. He finally looked directly at Rostova. "I also made an inquiry about your unit insignia." He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a memo from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Captain Miller read it aloud. "The Phoenix emblem, designation Fides in Tenebris, is authorized for wear only by operational members of Task Force Trident. Its wearers are not subject to local uniform regulations regarding insignia. All inquiries into the task force are to be directed to the undersigned." The memo was signed by a 4-star general at the Pentagon. Task Force Trident. A name spoken only in whispers, a unit that officially did not exist. They were the phantoms sent to solve problems no one else could. The Phoenix wasn't just a patch. It was a warning. It meant you were in the presence of someone who operated on a different plane, under a different set of rules. Thorne stood up. He walked over to Rostova, his movements stiff. He stopped in front of her. In front of everyone, he unpinned the combat infantryman badge from his own uniform. Then he reached out and touched the Phoenix patch on her sleeve. It was an act of profound public concession. My comments in the dining facility were in error, he said, his voice a low gravel. They were not befitting an officer of my rank. They will not be repeated. He stepped back and rendered a slow, formal salute. It was a shocking gesture. A general officer saluting a staff sergeant. But in that room it felt correct. Felt earned. Colonel Davies, his face pale, slowly rose and did the same. Then Captain Miller. Then every other officer in the room. Rostova did not smile or show any sign of triumph. She simply returned the general's salute with a crisp, perfect motion. The institutional correction was complete. The public humiliation had been answered by public recognition. Later that evening, Rostova was back in her workspace. The faint hum of the servers was a comforting sound. She was meticulously cleaning her rifle, each component wiped down, oiled and inspected. The weapon was immaculate, a tool of absolute precision. Captain Miller walked in and stood by her desk. He held out a new patch. It was the insignia of Thorne's command, the one worn by everyone else on the forward operating base. The general wanted you to have this, he said quietly. As a sign of integration, Rostova looked at the patch, then at her own sleeve where the Phoenix sat. She did not take it. We are a temporary attachment, Captain. My insignia is correct. Miller nodded, understanding. It was not about ego. It was about identity. She was who she was. She did not need their approval, only their operational compliance. Fair enough, he said. I've just read your full after-action report. The one you filed after the incident in the dining facility. You logged the whole thing. It is standard procedure to document all interactions that deviate from professional conduct, she said, not looking up from her rifle. And the one you filed after the mission is 3 sentences long. Target acquired at 1974 meters. Shot executed. Target neutralized. Miller shook his head in wonder. You're a woman of few words, Eva. She finished reassembling the bolt of her rifle, the metallic click of the parts sliding together echoing in the quiet room. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and calm. The mission was over. The loud, arrogant voices had been silenced by quiet competence. The system, bent out of shape by ego, had been forced back into alignment by proof. She picked up her logbook and made one final entry for the day. She wrote a single, concise sentence that summarized the entire affair, from the insult in the dining hall to the salute in the debriefing. Correction was achieved.